In the rolling hills of northern England, where the moors stretch endlessly into the horizon, a dark chapter of modern history was written. It began in whispers. Missing children vanished without a trace, but what unfolded would leave a scar so deep it would haunt the nation for decades. Between 2002 and 2004, 5 young lives were stolen. 5 children, aged 8 to 14, disappeared in a quiet town where neighbors left their doors unlocked and where trust was woven into the fabric of daily life. But beneath the surface of that serene community lurked a darkness no one could have imagined. What makes this story even more harrowing is the evidence left behind. Horrifying recordings of the victims' final moments, captured by the perpetrators themselves. These tapes, along with the heinous acts committed, reveal a level of cruelty that defies comprehension. This is not just a story of crime. It's a story of manipulation, of a twisted partnership born out of depravity and control. Together, they orchestrated a reign of terror that baffled investigators and shattered families. Their pact was as calculated as it was evil. In a few moments, we'll uncover the chilling tale of how an entire community was gripped by fear, how the truth was unraveled piece by piece, and how the culprits, monsters hiding in plain sight, were finally brought to justice. But first, let us step into the shadows, where it all began. In the early 2000s, the town of Wetherly seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Nestled among the quiet moors, its charm lay in its simplicity. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a sense of safety that had long been a hallmark of this rural community. But beneath the surface of its idyllic calm, darkness was quietly stirring. It started on a chilly autumn evening in October 2002. 11-year-old Sophie Carter never made it home from school. Her parents reported her missing within hours, but the local police, accustomed to kids wandering off, treated it as nothing more than a runaway case. "She'll be back by morning," they said, but morning came, and Sophie did not. Days turned into weeks, and the search for Sophie intensified. Volunteers combed the moors, her photo was plastered across the town, and her parents pleaded for her safe return on local news stations. Yet no clues emerged, no witnesses, no leads, no sign of Sophie. Then, in January 2003, tragedy struck again. 8-year-old Thomas Green vanished while walking home from his grandmother's house, a road he'd taken dozens of times before. His disappearance, eerily similar to Sophie's, sent shockwaves through Wetherly. For the first time, people began locking their doors and questioning their neighbors. Fear was settling in, and with it came whispers of something sinister. By the spring of that year, a third child, 14-year-old Emma Fletcher, was gone. Unlike the others, Emma was a teenager, more independent, less likely to wander off without telling anyone. Her case brought a new level of urgency to the investigation. What had initially been dismissed as isolated incidents now seemed undeniably connected. Forensic teams scoured every inch of Wetherly and the surrounding moors. Flyers were distributed across the county. Law enforcement set up a task force, bringing in criminal profilers who speculated that the perpetrator was likely someone familiar with the area, someone who knew how to blend in, how to disappear into the fabric of the town unnoticed. Meanwhile, the town of Wetherly was unraveling. Parents escorted their children to and from school, playdates became a thing of the past, and curfews were strictly enforced. Every stranger was viewed with suspicion, every odd glance analyzed. But for the families of Sophie, Thomas, and Emma, life had come to a standstill. Birthdays passed without celebration. Empty chairs at dinner tables became a daily reminder of their absence. By the summer of 2003, tensions reached a boiling point. A local man, Mark Collins, was briefly arrested after a neighbor claimed to have seen him behaving suspiciously near a school. But after days of interrogation and a thorough search of his home, Collins was released without charge. He was innocent, but the damage had already been done. Wetherly was on edge, and the lack of answers was becoming unbearable. Then, in October of 2003, a breakthrough came, though not in the way anyone had hoped. a jogger discovered a small weathered cassette tape lying in the grass at the edge of the moors. The label, partially smudged, bore a single haunting word: play. When police examined its contents, they were horrified. It was a recording of a young girl sobbing, pleading, her voice trembling with fear. A male voice could be heard in the background, calm, almost taunting. The recording was unmistakably authentic, and its implications were devastating. Sophie, Thomas, Emma, they hadn't just vanished, they'd been taken. Now, the investigation had a new urgency, but also a new horror. Who had made the tape? Was it a trophy, a taunt, or a message? And most chillingly, how many more were there? As the community grappled with the horrifying reality, police doubled their efforts. They were now in a race against time to catch a predator lurking among them. But the truth, when it finally came to light, would be more chilling than anyone could have imagined. The discovery of the cassette tape changed everything. For Detective Inspector Claire Reynolds and her team, it was no longer a case of missing children. It was the work of a predator. A predator who was methodical, sadistic, and disturbingly calculated. The evidence, though horrifying, gave investigators their first tangible clue, but it also opened a Pandora's box of questions. Forensic analysts scrutinized the tape, searching for anything that might point to its origins. Background noise was enhanced, revealing faint sounds of birds and a low hum that experts identified as industrial machinery. This suggested the recording wasn't made on the moors, but rather near an industrial area. Investigators narrowed their focus to locations within a 10-mile radius of Wetherly that matched this description. Meanwhile, law enforcement launched a public appeal. The community was urged to report anyone with access to audio equipment or anyone who might have exhibited strange or reclusive behavior. Dozens of tips poured in, but most were dead ends. A retired sound technician, a reclusive man who lived in a caravan near the moors, a local musician who had recently moved to town. Each was investigated thoroughly, yet none were connected to the case. As the weeks turned into months, the pressure on the investigation mounted. The media seized on the tape, dubbing the unknown perpetrator the Phantom of Wetherly. The moniker only deepened the public's fear, casting a shadow over the once tranquil town. But amidst the noise, one tip caught Reynolds' attention. A maintenance worker reported seeing an abandoned house near an old factory on the outskirts of town. He mentioned strange noises coming from the property late at night, though he assumed it was just teenagers causing trouble. Reynolds led a team to investigate the property. The house, cloaked in overgrown ivy and crumbling from neglect, seemed like the perfect hiding place for someone who wanted to remain invisible. Inside, the air was heavy with decay. Empty beer cans, cigarette butts, and discarded wrappers littered the floor. But in a locked room at the back of the house, investigators found something that sent chills down their spines. A small, soundproofed chamber. The walls were lined with foam insulation, and a single chair sat bolted to the floor. It was the kind of room designed for one purpose: isolation. The team scoured the house for additional evidence. They found fragments of hair and fibers which were immediately sent to the lab for DNA analysis. In a pile of trash near the chamber, they uncovered another cassette tape, this one labeled with a single initial, T. When they played it, they heard the terrified voice of a young boy, Thomas Green. The sobbing, the pleading, the cold and detached voice of a man, it was unmistakable. This discovery confirmed their worst fears. The predator had used the house to hold and torture his victims, but it also brought them closer to understanding his methods. He didn't operate impulsively. Every action was premeditated, every step meticulously planned. He chose children who were vulnerable, often walking alone or in isolated areas. He lured them, subdued them, and brought them to this house of horrors. As investigators pieced together the predator's pattern, the DNA results came back. The samples found in the house matched profiles in the national database. Profiles linked to two of the missing children, Thomas Green and Emma Fletcher. This was a breakthrough, but it raised an agonizing question. Where were the other victims? And were they still alive? Detective Reynolds' team expanded their search, following leads that took them to abandoned properties, secluded sheds, and isolated stretches of the moors. Each location revealed fragments of the predator's life, burned scraps of clothing, torn pages from children's books, and more cassette tapes. The tapes became a crucial part of the investigation. They were examined not just for their content but for clues about the man who had created them. The task force brought in a profiler, Dr. Malcolm Hayes, to help decode the mind behind these atrocities. Hayes painted a chilling picture of a man consumed by control and power, someone who thrived on the fear and helplessness of his victims. He likely had a partner, Hayes speculated, someone who shared his depravity or was manipulated into complicity. The dynamic between these two individuals, he explained, would be critical to understanding their motives and ultimately capturing them. By now, the case had gripped the nation. News channels ran continuous updates. Families across the country were keeping their children close, and in Wetherly, the town's residents were united by a collective sense of unease, their trust in one another shattered. People began to question everyone, even those they'd known for years. Could their neighbor be the monster they were hunting? Could the man who bagged their groceries, the woman who walked her dog past their house, be hiding a terrible secret? The turning point came in the spring of 2004. A factory worker, intrigued by the police's description of the predator's habits, reported seeing a man and woman behaving suspiciously near the abandoned house months earlier. The worker recalled the man carrying equipment in and out of the property while the woman waited in a van. The van's license plate, partially remembered, provided the breakthrough investigators needed. Detectives traced the plate to a vehicle registered to a man named Colin Andrews, a reclusive figure with a history of petty crimes. His address led them to a small flat in a rundown part of town. Surveillance was set up, and within days, Andrews and a woman, identified as his girlfriend Maria Beckett, were taken into custody. But the arrests didn't come without a cost. Inside their flat, detectives discovered yet another tape, this one labeled with a single word: goodbye. It was a message, a cruel reminder of their final act. The voices on the tape revealed new horrors and a chilling reality. Their reign of terror had spanned years, and the full extent of their crimes had yet to be uncovered. The arrest of Colin Andrews and Maria Beckett marked the beginning of the end of a nightmare. Under intense interrogation, Andrews remained defiant, offering nothing but smug silence. Maria Beckett, however, cracked within hours, revealing the twisted details of their crimes. She described how Andrews lured the children with promises of safety, how he meticulously planned every abduction, and how he manipulated her into participating. Her confession painted a harrowing picture of a man who thrived on domination and fear. Detectives combed through the flat and found a trove of evidence: Polaroid photos, maps marked with ominous red circles, and additional tapes, each more disturbing than the last. These artifacts chronicled their reign of terror, revealing connections to previously unsolved disappearances across the region. The scale of their crimes was staggering, and the weight of their cruelty left seasoned investigators shaken. The trial of Andrews and Beckett gripped the nation. Survivors' families sat through weeks of testimony, reliving the horrors inflicted on their children. Andrews showed no remorse, his cold gaze fixed forward as prosecutors detailed his heinous acts. Beckett's tearful testimony offered insight into her role as both a victim and an accomplice, but it did little to absolve her in the eyes of the public. Both were convicted of multiple counts of murder, abduction, and torture. Andrews received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Beckett, though spared the same fate due to her cooperation, was sentenced to 40 years. In the aftermath, the town of Wetherly struggled to heal. Memorials were erected in honor of the victims, and their families vowed to keep their memories alive. The case became a grim reminder of the evil that can hide behind familiar faces and the resilience of a community determined to reclaim its peace. Thanks for watching till the end. If you found this video intriguing, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below, and let's continue to uncover the truth behind the world's most chilling crimes together. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the darkest secrets often hide in plain sight. Until next time, thank you for being a part of Deadly Secrets.